Is Africa turning its back on the West? It sure looks like it. More and more African countries, including Burkina Faso, are making it clear. They're tired of so-called aid packages loaded with conditions. Tired of deals that benefit foreign banks more than African farmers. Tired of being lectured while their resources are extracted. They want something different now. New partners, new rules, a new power dynamic. And for many, BRICS is starting to look like the door they've been waiting to walk through. But is this shift as simple as it sounds? And how is France, the old colonial powerhouse, reacting now that the winds are blowing the other way? Let's dig in. Burkina Faso's latest move to explore joining BRICS isn't just a line on a diplomat's calendar. It's a statement, a big one. It signals a break from decades of leaning toward Western powers, especially France. It's a public declaration that Burkina Faso is ready to leave the old alliances behind and chart its own future. But why now? And why BRICS? Because BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, isn't just a club of emerging economies anymore. It's becoming a global counterweight. It was built to challenge Western-dominated institutions like the IMF and World Bank, which for decades dictated the economic future of developing countries through loans, debt traps and reform programs that rarely worked out in Africa's favour. For countries like Burkina Faso, the appeal is obvious. Years of political chaos, rising extremism, and a crushing reliance on foreign aid have pushed Burkina Faso to the edge. Since Captain Ibrahim Traore took power in 2022, something in the country's direction and its attitude has shifted. For decades, France's influence ran deep. Military operations like Operation Barkhane, control over the CFA franc, and endless political entanglements made France feel less like an ally and more like a landlord. But despite all that presence, all that investment, terrorism kept getting worse. Since 2015, jihadist attacks haven't slowed, they've exploded. Civilians, soldiers, even entire towns have become targets. For many in Burkina Faso, this failure to bring security was the final blow to the so-called Western model. That's why today, Burkina Faso isn't pivoting toward BRICS out of ideology. It's pivoting out of necessity. Because BRICS, especially players like China and Russia, offers something the West often hasn't: respect for sovereignty, non-interference, and development deals without political lectures. China, for example, has spent years pouring billions into African roads, railways, and ports, without demanding elections, regime changes, or constitutional rewrites. And Traore knows timing is everything. Right now, the West is distracted, wrangling with inflation, political divisions, and crises in Ukraine and the Middle East. In that silence, leaders like Traore are finding the space to move differently. They're not just turning away from foreign aid, they're turning away from dependence itself. Burkina Faso's interest in joining BRICS isn't a soft move. It's a direct challenge to the old system, where aid came with obedience and loans came with loss of control. But let's be real, this realignment raises tough questions. Is this true independence, or just swapping one kind of master for another? Will Eastern powers really offer better terms, or will new dependencies just wear different flags? There's no simple answer. BRICS has its own set of tensions, rivalries and complexities. It's not a perfect club. But for Burkina Faso, it offers something the old system never truly did: a fighting chance to break free from the endless cycle of extraction and underdevelopment. And this isn't just talk. Signs of this new strategy are already starting to show. The Burkinabe government isn't just making noise, it's taking action. They're nationalising key sectors, renegotiating unfair contracts, and claiming ownership over their own natural resources. Not to become someone else's puppet, not to swap one master for another, but to finally become a real player on the global stage. And France, predictably, France isn't exactly clapping from the sidelines. Its influence across West Africa is crumbling, not just in Burkina Faso, but in Mali, Niger, and beyond. And Paris is waking up to a new reality. Africa is no longer asking for permission. Burkina Faso's move toward BRICS isn't just about geopolitics, it's deeply symbolic. It's a rejection of the old paternalistic system where African nations had to play by someone else's rules to survive. It's a push for a future shaped by Africans, for Africans. And now the real question isn't whether the West approves, it's whether Burkina Faso and countries like it can stay the course. Can they turn this momentum into true sovereignty and real sustainable development? Or will they get pulled into a new web of foreign interests wearing different colours? Because make no mistake, this isn't just a political reshuffling, it's a statement. Africa isn't waiting anymore. And Burkina Faso just drew a line in the sand. So what about BRICS? Is it really the future, or just a different flavour of the same old dependency? That's what we have to dig into. Because BRICS isn't just another alliance, it's a new blueprint for global power. One where countries like Burkina Faso aren't just included politely, they're empowered. Given space to build, grow, and assert themselves without being tied down by hidden conditions. And that's the shockwave the West didn't see coming. For far too long, Western engagement in Africa came wrapped in the language of development, but tied up with strings. Trade deals that locked in dependency IMF loans, glued to painful austerity aid that often looked more like control than support. The West rarely gave anything without expecting something much bigger in return. That's where BRICS offers something radically different. It's not about domination, it's about partnership. It's not about dictating what reforms you must make. It's about respecting sovereignty, even when it's messy, even when it's uncomfortable. And for leaders like Traore and millions of Africans, that difference matters. Because countries like China, India, Russia, Brazil, and South Africa understand the weight of a rigged system. They know what it feels like to fight uphill against centuries of exploitation and being told to wait your turn. They've lived it. And now they're offering something else, a way out. Instead of offering sympathy, BRICS offers something far more powerful, opportunity. Look at China's Belt and Road Initiative. It's not just a catchy phrase, it's a massive global web of ports, roads, railways, and energy grids connecting developing nations to markets and, most importantly, to each other. These aren't charity projects, they're strategic investments, the kind that rewire entire regions for trade, for energy, for independence. And they're exactly the kind of foundation Africa has needed for decades to truly stand on its own. That's what makes BRICS different. It's not handing out favours, it's giving countries like Burkina Faso a stake in their own future, on their own terms. Meanwhile, the West, for all its talk about development and democracy, has never really offered that kind of freedom. Its systems, financial, diplomatic, economic, are built to preserve imbalance. Even when the aid comes wrapped in good intentions, it's laced with fine print, policy concessions, exclusive mining rights, backdoor political deals. The reality is, Western help almost always came with chains. In contrast, BRICS is building something without shackles. No lectures about democracy before you get a loan. No quiet conditions tying up your sovereignty behind the scenes. Look at what China is already doing across the continent. Solar fields in Kenya, wind farms in South Africa. Not quick fixes, not temporary aid drops, permanent infrastructure, the kind that gives countries real power over their futures. Burkina Faso could be next. And here's the bigger picture, the one that makes Washington, Paris, and London sweat. BRICS isn't just building roads and power plants, it's building alternatives. Alternatives to the dollar-dominated system. Alternatives to the IMF's debt traps. Alternatives to the economic models that kept Africa playing catch-up while others cashed in. The new development bank, NDB, backed by BRICS, is already pouring money into projects across the global south, without demanding painful austerity programs, without gutting national industries in the name of efficiency. This isn't just about who signs the checks, it's about who holds the pen when the future gets written. And that's where Traore's stand makes Burkina Faso impossible to ignore. He's not just rejecting Western aid, he's rejecting the conditions, the hidden costs, that kept African nations stuck in cycles of dependence. He's choosing sovereignty over subservience, not because the West never showed up, but because the West never offered true freedom. That's the difference BRICS brings to the table. Its members know exactly what it feels like to fight colonialism, to be written off, to be told to wait your turn. They know what it means to reclaim dignity from systems built to deny it. And what does BRICS offer that the West never really could? Liberation, not just from economic chains, but from the entire system that made those chains in the first place. A chance for Burkina Faso not to be managed, not to be moulded, but to be a maker of its own destiny. Because Traore doesn't want Burkina Faso to be another sad statistic in some foreign development report. He wants it to be a force, a builder, a nation that writes its own story, not someone else's version of it. And with BRICS backing that vision, for the first time in a very long time, that dream looks within reach. Because the truth is, true empowerment was never part of the Western playbook. It never has been. It was never in their DNA. The West may have offered money, aid, investment, but always on a leash. Tethered to conditions, tethered to influence, tethered to a system where Africa was always meant to stay in the passenger seat. BRICS is offering something different. Not just a new seat at the table, a chance to build the table itself. BRICS, unlike the traditional Western alliances, stands for something deeper. Cooperation built on mutual respect, without forcing political ideologies down anyone's throat. And at this critical turning point in its history, that's exactly what Burkina Faso needs. So how has the West reacted to Burkina Faso's bold pivot toward BRICS? Predictably, with the usual polished statements: respect for sovereign choices, support for diverse partnerships, commitment to global cooperation. The kind of diplomatic soundbites that sound calm and supportive, but underneath, panic. Because everyone behind those podiums knows the truth. This isn't just Burkina Faso tweaking its foreign policy. This is a full-blown tectonic shift. Burkina Faso's turn toward BRICS strikes at the foundation of the very system the West has spent decades building and dominating. Let's start with what this really means economically. For years, Burkina Faso, like so many African countries, was stuck inside a financial maze built by institutions like the IMF and the World Bank. Sold as development partners, these organisations always came with strings, structural reforms that gutted local industries, austerity measures that starved public services, governance changes that fit Western models, not African realities. The result? Instead of creating independence, these deals tightened the chains. Growth, when it happened, was often designed to serve external interests, not the local economy. The profits left, the debt stayed. Now, with the BRICS alliance, Burkina Faso is cutting that cord. Through the new development bank, NDB, it can now tap into financing for real infrastructure, real energy projects, real growth initiatives, without being forced into economic surrender. It's not just about getting loans, it's about getting them without selling your sovereignty. It's about building without begging, about investing without kneeling. And that's why the West is rattled, because for the first time, nations like Burkina Faso have a credible alternative, an option that doesn't require them to trade away their dignity for the promise of progress. And that, more than anything, threatens the old world order. The system wasn't built for Africa to lead, it was built for Africa to follow. But now with BRICS, that script is being torn apart, and Burkina Faso is helping lead the rewrite. Naturally, the West is sounding the alarm, because if Burkina Faso can step out of line, what's stopping the rest of Africa from doing the same? And if Burkina Faso's pivot to BRICS proves even half successful, it could swing open the floodgates. Other African nations, many of which have spent years quietly questioning one-sided deals and empty partnerships, might start making their own exits. And if that happens, the entire Western-crafted economic structure, carefully built over decades to keep the global South in check, could start unravelling. But here's the real kicker. The West isn't just panicking about money, it's panicking about power. Because Africa isn't just a distant continent full of goodwill missions and peacekeeping photo ops. It's a strategic prize, overflowing with oil, uranium, gold, rare earth minerals, and the young workforce of the future. For decades, Western powers have anchored their influence across Africa through military bases, humanitarian programs, lopsided economic agreements. They kept a grip on key regions, often under the banner of stability or development, but always tied to their own strategic needs. Now, with Burkina Faso looking to BRICS, the message is loud and clear. Africa is done playing by the old rules. And this isn't some isolated case. From Mali to Niger, from Guinea to Chad, a growing number of nations are actively breaking free from the Western orbit and gravitating toward BRICS, especially China and Russia, who offer partnerships without the heavy colonial baggage. This shift terrifies the West, because BRICS isn't just another political club, it's an ideological rebellion. For years, the Western narrative was clear. Democracy, capitalism, liberalism. That was the gold standard. The path every developing country was supposed to aspire to. But BRICS flips that narrative upside down. Instead of preaching reforms, BRICS talks about infrastructure. Instead of lectures on governance, it offers trade deals. Instead of conditions and lectures, it offers sovereignty. In short, BRICS says, build your nation your way. And for leaders across Africa, that's not just appealing, it's revolutionary. Do you think the West will ever truly accept this new reality? Can it come to terms with an Africa that no longer plays second fiddle? An Africa that chooses its own allies, its own strategies, its own destiny? And what about Burkina Faso? Is its future more secure, more independent, with BRICS standing beside it? Will it find the stability, the investment, and the respect it has been denied for so long? These are not just questions for Burkina Faso, they are questions for an entire generation. Because what's happening today isn't just a shift in alliances, it's a shift in global history. It's the long overdue rewriting of a story where Africa is no longer the afterthought, the pawn, or the marketplace for someone else's dreams. It's a story where Africa stands at the centre, as a maker of decisions, as a shaper of futures, as a master of its own fate. And Burkina Faso is at the heart of that change. With BRICS, it's not just buying influence, it's building its sovereignty. It's stepping into a new world where partnerships are based on mutual respect, not hidden agendas. Where investments come without handcuffs, where nations are free to rise, not just survive. So when you watch what's happening in Burkina Faso, know this: you're watching history unfold. You're watching a new Africa being born. And it's a movement bigger than one country. It's a signal to Mali, to Niger, to Chad, to Congo, to the whole continent. We can lead, we can build, we can decide, without permission, without apology, without fear. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because your voice matters. Tell us, will the West adapt, or will it resist? Is BRICS the future Africa deserves? And can Burkina Faso inspire others to break free too? Subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, because by subscribing you're doing more than staying updated. You're standing with a movement to reclaim Africa's rightful place in the world, a movement to rewrite the future together. Don't just watch history happen, be part of it. Click that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join us as we uncover the truth, celebrate Africa's rise, and inspire the next generation of changemakers. Thank you for watching. Thank you for believing. And thank you for being part of something bigger.